I finally snapped after watching my daughter get ignored for years. I, 34F, have been married to my husband, 35M, for 3 years. I have a 6-year-old daughter from my first marriage. My ex-husband isn't really in the picture. He moved across the country shortly after the divorce and hasn't made much effort since. My current husband, however, has been a godsend. He stepped into my daughter's life when she was just 3 years old. He didn't just accept her, he chose her. He's the one who gets up at 2 a.m. if she has a nightmare. He's the one at every soccer practice, and he's the one she calls dad. We also have a 2-year-old daughter together. In our house, there is no half or step. They are just sisters. Period. The problem, as you can probably guess from the title, is my mother-in-law. From the day I was introduced to her, she was civil. That's the best word for it. She wasn't openly mean, but there was this invisible wall. She'd smile, but it never reached her eyes. She'd ask about my work, but she'd never ask about my life. I figured, okay, I'm a divorcee with a toddler. Maybe she's just protective of her son. I told myself to give it time. I thought that once she saw how much I loved him and how much my daughter loved him, she'd thaw out. Then I got pregnant with our 2-year-old. The shift was instantaneous and violent. The woman who used to give my oldest a polite hello suddenly became the most doting, over-the-top grandmother I've ever seen, but only for the baby. I want to paint the picture of what our lives have looked like for the last 2 years, because it's the death by 1,000 cuts style of emotional neglect. We'll go over to her house for Sunday dinner. My Emile will literally run to the car before we've even unbuckled the seats. She'll yank the door open on the toddler's side, scoop her up, and start showering her with kisses. There's my princess. There's Grandma's whole world. I missed you so much, my beautiful girl. Meanwhile, my 6-year-old is unbuckling herself, hopping out of the car with a drawing she spent all morning on. She'll walk up to her grandma and say, "Hi, Grandma. Look what I made for you." My Emile won't even look down. She'll keep bouncing the 2-year-old and say, "That's nice, honey. Go put it on the counter. Watch out, don't trip over the baby's toys." It's been like this every single week. My Emile's Facebook is a shrine to the 2-year-old. Hundreds of photos. Captions like "the only thing that matters," or "my heart in human form." There isn't a single photo of my 6-year-old. Not from her birthday, not from Christmas, nothing. When we had my 6-year-old's graduation from kindergarten, my Emile forgot the date despite us sending 3 reminders. But she made sure to show up 2 hours early for the 2-year-old's playgroup graduation, which was literally just toddlers crawling through a tunnel. The internal toll this is taking on me is immense. I spend every car ride home trying to distract my oldest, so she doesn't notice the disparity. But she's 6. She's observant. She's kind. And she's starting to realize she's the extra person in the room. My daughter, bless her soul, adores this woman. She doesn't have another grandmother figure nearby. She calls her grandma with so much pride. Last Christmas we went shopping, and I told my daughter she could pick out one gift for each person with her allowance. She spent 45 minutes in the candle aisle. She kept picking them up, smelling them, and putting them back. She finally chose this little vanilla-scented candle because she remembered Emile saying she liked nice smells once. When we got to the house, my 6-year-old handed her the wrapped candle. My Emile opened it, looked at it for 2 seconds, said thanks, and set it on a side table. 5 minutes later, the 2-year-old handed her a piece of cardboard she'd scribbled on with a black marker. My Emile started crying. "Oh my goodness. Look at this. It's a masterpiece. I'm going to frame this. You are so talented." I looked at my husband. He looked at the floor. He does that a lot lately. The tipping point happened last weekend. It was supposed to be a low-key dinner. We walked in, and my Emile immediately went to her gift closet. She came out holding a massive, expensive-looking stuffed unicorn. It was bigger than the 2-year-old. "I saw this and just had to get it for my favorite girl," she cooed, handing it to the toddler. My 6-year-old just stood there. She wasn't crying, she wasn't throwing a fit. She just had this hopeful, expectant look on her face. She was waiting for her turn. She stood there for a full minute, just watching her sister play with this giant toy. My Emile didn't even acknowledge her. She didn't have a consolation sticker or a piece of candy or even a hug. Nothing. The ride home was quiet. Usually the girls are chatting, but it was silent. Then, in that tiny, high-pitched 6-year-old voice, she asked, "Mom, why does Grandma only bring presents for Sissy? Did I do something bad?" I felt like someone had reached into my chest and squeezed my heart until it stopped. I had to pull the car over because I couldn't see through the tears. My husband tried to comfort her, saying, "Grandma just forgets sometimes, sweetie." But I snapped. I told him, "No, don't lie to her. She's not stupid." I waited until we got the girls to bed. I was vibrating with rage. I called my MIL. I didn't yell at first. I tried to be rational. I said, "Listen, we need to talk about how you treat the girls. It's becoming very obvious that you are favoring the youngest, and it's hurting my oldest. She's asking questions now. From now on, if you want to bring a gift, you bring two. If you want to take one for a special day, you take both. If you can't treat them with equal kindness, then we aren't coming over anymore." The silence on the other end was icy. Then she sighed that long, dramatic martyr's sigh. "I don't know why you're being so dramatic," she said. "I'm allowed to have a special bond with my granddaughter. It's different, and you know it." I asked her, "What do you mean different?" "Well," she said, her voice getting sharper. "She's not actually my granddaughter, is she? I'm polite to her, but you can't force a biological connection that isn't there. It's not fair for you to try and control my relationship with my real grandchild because you're sensitive about your past." The word real did it. I lost it. I didn't scream, but my voice was shaking. I told her that if my oldest isn't real, enough to be her granddaughter, then my youngest isn't real, enough to be in her life either. I told her that we are a package deal. If she rejects one, she loses both. I told her not to call us and hung up. My husband is torn. He agrees that his mother is being difficult, but he thinks I'm nuking the relationship. He says she's old-fashioned and that you can't force feelings. He's worried that if we stop the visits, his mom will never form a bond with either of them, and he doesn't want his biological daughter to lose out on a grandma just because the grandma is a jerk to her sister. But I can't do it. I can't sit there and watch my 6-year-old spirit break every Sunday. I can't let her grow up thinking she's less than because of her DNA. Now, the extended family drama has started. Apparently, Emile has called everyone, aunts, cousins, or sisters, telling them that I am weaponizing her granddaughter to punish her for being honest. I'm getting texts from people I haven't spoken to in a year telling me I'm being cruel and that grandparents have rights. One cousin even called me bitter because my first marriage failed and said I was taking my insecurities out on a helpless old woman. A helpless old woman? She's 58 and plays tennis 3 times a week. She's not helpless. She's calculated. I feel like I'm standing on an island. My husband is supportive in words, but in actions, he just wants me to calm down so we can find a middle ground. But what is the middle ground for child favoritism? Does she only ignore my daughter 50% of the time instead of 100%? I'm so angry that I can't sleep. I look at my oldest, who is currently sleeping with that vanilla candle she bought for her grandma because Emile left it behind on the side table, and I want to scream. Am I the a-hole? Am I being the dramatic, bitter divorcee they say I am? Or am I right to cut her off until she can be a decent human being to a 6-year-old? Update 1. It's been a few hours since I posted this, and I've been reading the comments. A lot of you are asking about my husband's stance. To be clear, he loves my oldest. He really does. But he was raised by this woman, and I think he's spent his whole life excusing her behavior. He sees it as that's just how mom is, whereas I see it as your mom is a bully. He came into the room a few minutes ago and said, "Look, I talked to her. She's willing to apologize if you apologize for threatening to take the baby away." I stared at him. Did she apologize for saying our daughter isn't real? He rubbed the back of his neck. She said she misspoke because she was defensive. She said she'll try harder to include her, but she wants us to bring the baby over this Saturday just for a few hours so they can reconnect after the fight. I told him absolutely not. No solo visits. No reconnecting, while the 6-year-old sits at home wondering why she wasn't invited. He got frustrated and said I'm being inflexible. He said, "You're making this a war, and the only people who lose are the kids." Is he right? Am I the one making it a war, or was the war started the second she handed out that unicorn? I'm standing my ground for now, but the pressure from his side of the family is relentless. My phone hasn't stopped buzzing. I feel like I'm being gaslit by an entire family tree. I just want my kids to be okay. Update 2. The morning after my post felt tense from the moment we woke up. My husband was careful around me, overly calm in that way people get when they're trying not to trigger another argument. The girls were normal, thankfully. Breakfast cartoons, spilled cereal, the toddler demanding the same song 3 times in a row. Watching them together actually made everything harder because inside our house they are just sisters. There's no hierarchy. No real versus not real. Just 2 kids fighting over crayons. My phone started lighting up again before noon. Not angry messages this time, but long paragraphs from relatives explaining how I should look at things from Emil's perspective. Apparently, she had been telling people she felt attacked and humiliated, that I accused her of being a bad grandmother and threatened to erase her from her grandchild's life. The version circulating conveniently skipped over the part where she called my oldest not her real granddaughter. One message stuck with me. An aunt I've met maybe twice wrote that older children from previous marriages often struggle to find their place, and that forcing bonds only creates resentment. I stared at that text for a long time because it perfectly captured what everyone seemed to believe, that my 6-year-old's pain was an unfortunate but acceptable side effect of adult comfort. I didn't respond to anyone. I muted the conversation threads and tried to focus on the kids. That afternoon, my oldest asked if we were going to Grandma's house on Sunday, like usual. The question came casually while she colored at the kitchen table, but her eyes stayed on me longer than normal, like she already sensed the answer mattered. I told her we were taking a little break from visits. She nodded, quiet, then went back to coloring. No tantrum, no questions. That hurt more than anything else. Kids don't go quiet unless they already understand something is wrong. Later that evening, my husband and I finally had the conversation we'd both been avoiding. It didn't start as a fight. It started tired. He told me his mom felt pushed into a corner and believed I was punishing her for being honest about her feelings. I asked him if honesty included telling a child she wasn't real family. He didn't defend that part. He never does. Instead, he kept circling back to the idea that relationships take time and that ultimatums make people dig in deeper. What struck me was how different our priorities sounded when spoken out loud. He was worried about long-term family harmony. I was worried about immediate emotional damage to a 6-year-old who still believes adults mean what they say. At one point, he admitted something that changed how I saw his hesitation. Growing up, his mom favored his younger sister openly. He described it like it was normal, almost expected. His sister was the easy one, the social one, the one their mom bragged about. He learned early that pushing back only caused drama, so he adapted by minimizing his own feelings. Hearing that made a lot of things click into place. He wasn't defending favoritism because he agreed with it. He was defending survival habits he learned as a kid. That didn't make the situation acceptable, but it helped me understand why he kept asking for compromise when I couldn't see any middle ground. The next development came Saturday morning, when his mom called him again. I wasn't part of the conversation, but I could hear enough from across the room to understand the tone. It wasn't apologetic. It sounded strategic. After he hung up, he told me she wanted to reset and suggested taking only the toddler out for lunch so they could reconnect without tension. That was the moment something shifted inside me permanently. Not anger, clarity. Because it confirmed that she didn't actually understand the problem at all. In her mind, the solution to conflict involving both children was to remove the older one entirely. I told my husband calmly that separating the girls for her convenience was exactly what caused the situation in the first place. If we allowed that even once, we would be teaching our oldest that exclusion was negotiable. He argued that one lunch wouldn't damage anything. I asked him to imagine being 6 years old and watching your sister leave for a special outing you weren't allowed to attend, knowing it was because you didn't belong enough. He didn't have an answer for that. The conversation ended without resolution, but he texted his mom declining the visit. I could tell it cost him something emotionally. He looked exhausted afterward, like he had disappointed 2 people he loved at the same time. I thought things might calm down after that. They didn't. That evening, my Emil posted on Facebook. I won't quote it word for word, but it was one of those vague posts about boundaries being used as weapons and grandparents being pushed away for loving too much. Dozens of comments appeared within minutes, all supportive, all assuming she was the victim of an unreasonable daughter-in-law. Friends started messaging me asking if everything was okay. I didn't respond publicly. I refused to turn this into a social media war, especially when my kids will someday be old enough to read these things. Sunday came and went without a visit for the first time since my youngest was born. The house felt oddly peaceful. No tension before leaving, no emotional aftermath afterward. The girls played together most of the day building blanket forts. At one point, my oldest pulled her little sister into a hug and told her she was her best friend. I had to leave the room because I suddenly realized how close we had come to letting outside dynamics damage that bond. That night my husband sat next to me on the couch and admitted something quietly. He said he watched our oldest more closely that day and noticed how relaxed she seemed. No trying extra hard to impress anyone, no hovering near adults waiting for approval. He said he hadn't realized how much pressure she must have been feeling every visit. That was the first time I felt like we were truly on the same side instead of negotiating opposite fears. The real turning point happened 2 days later. Emile showed up at our house unannounced. I almost didn't open the door, but curiosity got the better of me. She stood there holding a small gift bag, looking composed but tense. My husband came to the door beside me, equally surprised. She asked to come in. The conversation that followed wasn't explosive. It was uncomfortable in a quieter way. She said she wanted to clear the air and admitted she shouldn't have used the word real. She claimed it came out wrong because she felt accused and defensive. I asked her directly whether she understood why our oldest was hurt. She hesitated long enough to answer my question without words. Eventually, she said bonding with a toddler felt natural because she saw her son in her, and that she didn't know how to feel the same connection with a child who reminded her of a past she wasn't part of. For the first time, I saw something other than coldness. Not kindness exactly, but insecurity. She wasn't intentionally trying to wound a child. She simply didn't see the emotional consequences of her behavior because she viewed relationships through biology first. I told her plainly that feelings can't always be controlled, but behavior can. A child doesn't understand emotional nuance. A child only sees who gets hugged, who gets gifts, who gets attention. The conversation stayed calm, but it wasn't magically resolved. She didn't suddenly transform into a perfect grandmother. What did change was acknowledgement. She admitted she hadn't considered how visible the difference was. Before leaving, she asked if she could try again, with both girls present. Not separately. Both. We agreed to a short visit later this week under one condition: no gifts for either child. Just time together. After she left, my husband looked relieved in a way I hadn't seen since this started. Not because everything was fixed, but because boundaries had finally been spoken out loud instead of avoided. I don't know how this will end. People don't rewrite lifelong habits overnight. She may slip back into old patterns. We may have to reinforce boundaries again. But for the first time, the responsibility for change isn't sitting entirely on my shoulders. What I do know is this: my oldest laughed more this week than she has in months. She hasn't asked why grandma prefers her sister again. The tension that used to follow every visit hasn't returned because there haven't been any yet. And maybe the biggest realization I've had through all of this is that protecting a child sometimes looks dramatic to people who benefited from silence. Standing firm feels extreme only to those who are comfortable with things staying unfair. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Daily Tales Update for more such stories.